Matthew and Charmayne Clarke. We're from Pine Grove Station, just up the road here, about another 15 or 20 k's. We're predominantly sheep enterprise. We've got a few cattle. Country much similar to this, sort of same sort of ground. Bit of flood out country, Spinifex hills out through the ranges. So yeah, we've got a bit of everything. Over the last 2 years, we've started trialling some rotational grazing on a section of our property. We've probably only done a bit over half of it, to be honest. As out the back, we've just left things pretty much as they were, just so we can get our heads around it. And yeah, this is just a bit of our experience on how it's worked out and what we found along the way. We sort of never considered it in the past, thinking it wasn't the done sort of thing in semi-arid and on reasonably large scale. So
we always thought it was for that summer, like tropics, like we just considered that's all you sort of get taught about, that's all you hear about, so we just thought doesn't suit us, which we were nicely wrong, thankfully.
Yeah. I mean, the reason why we sort of decided to go to have a trial at this path was after four years of pretty terrible drought there for a while. We were just looking for the quickest way to probably get our country back on track and our stock. Planning for the future too, to give us a bit more resilience, is that word that keeps popping up at the moment, but I guess that's, yeah, just where we were looking, and we looked around a few different things, and in 2002 we did the 7-day RCS course in Nauru, which Jess organised for us through the Northern and York Landscape Board, and that was a real eye-opener. Honestly, probably walked away from it thinking that it was all still too hard, to be honest, that it wouldn't work in our country, but yeah, so that course sort of covered all aspects of your business and your land and your soil. Yeah, it was quite in-depth. I'd recommend that one for anyone who had a bit of time to go on. And
that one really provoked our thinking. We had rested this paddock in 21, I think it was, to put our lambs into after weaning, and the paddock just got away, like it shot up, and to the point where we didn't even get to put anything in there. The grass seeds come out, and the RCS really got us thinking we'd missed that opportunity to graze it, and that there were better ways to graze it, and to see the amount of feed that had come up because we'd rested it just blew us away, and that really got those cogs going that there is a better way and we can do something different.
Yeah. Also sort of helped with RCS too, being an Eastern States based company. They probably have a little bit different thinking over there, and they're not scared to try a few new things, whereas in South Australia we're pretty stuck in our ways a lot of the time. So yeah, that was and then yeah, we sort of were looking around at everything, anything we could do and find, and we also did the Nature's Equity online course with Dick Richardson, and we've also met him a couple of times. He's really in depth on the ecology and plant succession and all the cycles in the environment. Like
his 7 paddock rotation and working, it's kind of, from what we've seen, it's quite close to working with the season cycles, so that really appealed to us, a lot of his work.
He's also very practical in that, you know, everything doesn't have to be done right from day one. You know, you can always do something better than what you're doing. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be up here to start with. You can start down low and just try something a bit different.
Yeah, and we like trials. We do a lot of different trials. It's probably the quickest way to bugger things up, and it's the quickest way to improve as well, though. So we do a lot of trials.
Yeah. So we sort of started off pretty slow. All we did was, as we lamb-tailed in last year, we just slowly boxed all the mobs together as they were coming out the yards, and yeah, ended up with a mob of over 1,000 ewes plus their lambs there. That wasn't a huge mob for us in some areas of our places, but on the front country that's probably a bit more developed and a bit more fenced up, that was, you know, probably twice, if not 3 times, what we'd normally have in a mob with lambs on them. So, but it worked fine. And now this year we've got a mob floating around at the moment of 3,200. Just we're moving them about once a fortnight or 3 weeks at the minute, which yeah, we'll go through that in a minute. But yeah, and as we said, the back half of our place, we're still running pretty much set stock just because we probably need to do a little bit of development out there to really utilise it
And it's
properly.
very, very different.
Yeah, and it's
wow.
different country to
It's-
manage, and
yeah.
so yeah, and it's chalk and cheese at the moment. But if you go from one section of the property to the other, like looking at the land, it's
So we had a good spring, which really helped us out. I guess that most people had it. But we noticed that we had a lot of fast growth. We moved the sheep in and out of paddocks, and that really stimulated it. And we were working, I know a lot of people like to say that time controlled, but I like to call it growth controlled. I think time puts something in your head that they have to be in there for so long, whereas I really like to work with that plant growth, and I like to call it growth controlled. We work very much with the plant of when we go in and when we go out and when we go back in, like how much recovery we're really giving the plant.
this was a bit of a, I think this might have been one night after the RCS course, we were talking to the bloke running it, and his thing was about mowing the lawn, and it's so true, and it stuck in my head that the more you mow your lawn, the more you have to mow it. Like if you just let your lawn grow, it'll get there and just stop. But if you mow it once a week, you seem to have to keep going back and mowing the bastard again.
It's a very simple term to explain what you're doing with your stock.
Yeah. And the growth you can get out of even plants in the desert like this is unbelievable at the right time of year. I'm not going to say it's all year round, but if you through that end of winter into spring, it's pretty phenomenal how quickly everything was coming back once we moved the stock off.
We do have 2 seasons here as well. Like we've very much got that winter and then those summer plants as well.
Yeah,
so we thought we were going to stop, sort of go slower with our grazing in that dry time, but we found we had to go faster because there was still a lot of plants growing. Even
through summer with very little rainfall, there's always something still growing, we found.
Yeah. So we're finding that we're getting more growth, a lot more growth in our plants. They're a lot fresher and stronger, healthier. We've definitely extended our green and growing time. We had the spear grass that it was green like summertime, deep into it. Like it was green all year. The binder weed stayed green for the whole time. It was a real eye opener to see what would actually stay green, really, isn't it?
And we're still learning this as we go, but I've even picked up in the last couple of days, anyone who's been around here, it hadn't been much fun with the hot winds we've been having, and normally I would expect that would just turn our country off like a light switch, but even I was driving around yesterday in the middle of the day and it was still green, waving in the wind like it. The plants have just got their root system so much more developed, they can just hang on that much longer. It should have. Any other year, I would have said by the middle of September with this sort of weather, it would be dry as chips by now. But
we've got a lot of barley grass and clover that's still green as green in all the patches. It does actually hold on a lot longer. So we are giving it that adequate rest, which makes a huge difference, of course. And we have a lot of palatable plants returning and getting bigger and bigger. Some of the ones we were like, well, we didn't even really know they were there. And with that rest, they're just getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and it's with the plants returning, you think, well, if you're going to make your land recover, you're going to have to put inputs, but we haven't done anything as far as inputs, and there's plants coming back that I've never seen before, so those seeds have clearly been there for at least 25 years that I've been living there, and I've never seen those plants make it to setting seed, so it's all just there if you just let it and give it a chance, I think.
And that greater biodiversity that we're all looking for. So our ground cover, it's nothing comparable at all to what it was. I mean, we did come out of that really dry time, but how quickly it's come back from rest is amazing. We're finding the hoof impact and the fertiliser is just speeding up those colonising plants. those bare areas are recovering amazingly and really, really fast. This is a spot here where the hoof impact was down the bottom, and you can see where the hoof impact was is where the plants are now. The stock don't seem to hang at the waters anymore. We've actually got feed growing around our waters. They go out to graze, they come back, they go out, they don't just sit all around it. A lot more organic matter and more root mass. The water is definitely infiltrating. We don't have as many gutters and creeks running, and I think the one time that we have, it was very clear water, like in the creeks. We have a lot more fogs, a lot less frost, that's been a big eye opener. Our kids go to school down this way, and going to the bus stop and back again, and noticing that we don't have frosts sitting on our property it's very different, isn't it? And we get a lot of misty rain just hanging over the property. Like when you go in and out of the property, you see it's just hanging over our place, which has been really nice to see. It's following that strip, I think. So we didn't get much of a 22 winter. So really this was right at the end of the drought. And this was the start of the growing season. So this side was rested, and this side was still, the other side was set stocked. So this is that real start of the green pick, as we call it. This one here, this side set stocked. This one is the one that we rested in 21. And then on the other side, it's still the set stocked, and the other side we have actually rotationally grazed that side of it.
And with that rotation through that last spring, you know, you do your sums, and we worked it out, and we took more feed out of that paddock than we'd ever taken set stocking it, and we still ended the season with more feed in it than we would normally. So it's just that plant recovery, and just the bulk of feed that comes back is quite unbelievable, we found.
So we use these charts. They've got other ones too, but these are the ones I use a fair bit to sort of know. I consider it where we're trying to aim with plants, which plants we're trying to graze for. And I take a lot from, if anyone hasn't seen it, I take a lot from this down here with the plant succession and the pH level and the fungi and the bacteria. I just think it's a wonderful chart that if any graziers haven't seen it, it can give you a really good idea of where you're tracking. So this side here, so this one's rotationally grazed and this one's set stocked. This other side's got a lot of wardsweed and bindii colonising, I call it, hardy type of plants. And this side, it still has some of those plants, but it's got a lot more grass coming back in it, and that's what your stock is going to want to eat. Stock do eat wardsweed, but it's at the start and at the end where they strip off the seeds. And I don't know that many sheep really eat bindii all that much. So to go to this instead of having your first colonising plants has been really good.
And we found after mobbing our stock back up, just their herding instincts have returned a bit. They generally move around in one mob. They will, when you move paddocks, they'll usually spread out over the whole paddock for a day or two, but then they always end up back in a mob, and they're actually, Charmayne calls it calm, but they're painfully slow now to move.
He hates them.
It is. So yeah, this
they
year
will be like here, and they will not move. Like
hopeless.
They just will not move by car.
This year's the first year we lambed in bigger mobs of up to sort of around 1,000, like in our inside sort of country, and we left them in one paddock for 6 weeks, which probably took that feed down a bit further than ideal, but it's, you know, you can't get everything perfect, but we didn't, you don't want to move them with tiny little lambs either, so you know, you've got to take a hit somewhere along the lines. But we didn't have any trouble with mismothering or losing lambs any more than normal, so we sort of, because they're always sort of moving on to new feed every, you know, at the most it's probably a month they might stay in a paddock. They often seem to get their gut fill before lunch, and they'll sit for the rest of the afternoon and then graze again at night time, which, you know, just saves them a lot of energy, and which all goes into production then basically, which is what we're really after. But yeah, it's very different moving the ones that we've been rotationing compared to the ones out the back that are still set stock, because yeah, it's the ones out the back can still be pretty mad at times, and ones in the front you can't get to move, so we need to find a happy medium there, I think.
So the management has definitely been one of the biggest eye-openers out of all of this. We thought it was just going to be all too hard, to be honest. We thought this is not for our country. But we have way less waters to check. There's 1 or 2 mobs, 3 at the most. Far less waters to troughs to clean. Biggest one has definitely been, we have contractors come in to do our shearing. So we move the sheep closer to the yard when we know they're coming, which for us has just been an absolute godsend, because at the moment with shearers we just don't know when they're going to turn up. It could be 1 week, it could be 6 weeks down the track, trying to find people to help do that. Now, because they're only in a couple of mobs, we can just move them closer whenever we want, and they're just sitting there ready to go. Like, we don't have to muster the whole property to get our sheep every single time we want to do something. They're always just worked closer to the yards. The management has been the best. Like, it's really, really good. When people say rotational is really hard, if you take that other side of it and think about the good things, it's such a godsend in a time where labour is just non-existent up this way. Yeah, it can make a big, big difference. We muster and move when we want. We don't have to do it when someone else is telling us we need you to do it. We just do it whenever we want, whenever it fits in. It's very easy. This is a little hard to understand, but I did want to put it in there because one of our hold-ups was that paradigm of rotational grazing is just a lot of mustering, a lot of moving. We can't do this. This is too hard. We had that mindset. Like, we really had that mindset. It was one of our biggest hold-ups. But to try to explain it, with set stocking, if you've got 3 main events for the year, 10 paddocks, you're moving 30 times. So with rotational, if you're set stocked for 3 months over lambing, we actually went a little shorter this time. Our lambs really got going, so we probably not quite as much as we probably should, but they really got going, so we did move quicker. So that's the 10 paddocks we mustered after tailing. So that leaves 20 musters in that same time. So if you break that down over the remaining 9 months, you can basically, roughly, be in a paddock for 15 days and then have 8.5 months rest in the other paddocks. That's a very simple way to explain it. It's not exactly what we do. It's just a comparison to explain to people that you think that there's a lot of mustering, but it's actually, when you think about how many paddocks you are mustering and how many times, it's very comparable, and it's not as daunting as what you think. And you can do whatever you want, really.
Yeah, the challenges we found along the way have been water, which it probably hasn't been a challenge. It was something we were really worried about, and it hasn't become a problem. Like, we haven't really come unstuck when it comes to water.
Do have to be mindful about it.
Yeah, and you probably do need to keep on top of it a little bit more because, you know, whatever tanks or
It could
you
become
have,
a big problem.
you don't have many days worth of storage if something goes wrong, whereas if you've only got a few hundred sheep in a paddock, well, you've got a week up your sleeve. But the bright side of it is if something goes wrong somewhere, you can just move because you've got a paddock somewhere else ready to go. But yeah, you do have to be mindful. You have to have enough water. I mean, decent water's goes without saying sort of thing with any stock. But yeah, the kangaroos have been a bit of a challenge, but we've just sort of taken that on as something that needs to be managed. You know, that was another thing for me. Someone said to me somewhere one day that, you know, croppers and farmers spend huge amount of time and money controlling weeds, and kangaroos are just our weed basically. So we've got a few things in place, all through the correct channels that we get people in to control them for us. So
We've got a commercial shooter and we've got sporting shooters, and they're still not keeping up with them.
Yeah.
We find that at the start of the season, they come in, like the growing season, they come in big numbers. Then once everybody's got some feed, then they spread out. And then at the end of the season, we get hammered again as well. So it's just something that we need to keep, we can get better at it.
yeah,
But it makes you, when you see
Yeah.
a paddock you've rested, just with big mobs of roos in there, it's pretty, why am I doing this? But they do spread out again. They really do.
Yeah, the infrastructure, which again we were pretty lucky, most of our place was sort of set up for handling large mobs, all our yards and whatnot, shearing shed, so we probably got away with that pretty well. You don't have to treat a mob of 3,000 sheep as a mob of 3,000 sheep. If you really want to, you can bring them in 400 at a time and treat them as 8 mobs of 400, so it's a bit of a mindset, and of course I like just to bring the whole lot in and do it in one day, but
He doesn't push up.
no, I draft, so it's easy for me. The other one that's a bit tricky is if sheep go missing when you've got mobs of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. If 200 go through the fence or over a grid, you don't notice, which we
very
had
hard to
happen at
tell.
one stage into the neighbours, but they soon told us, so it worked out. But yeah, something we're going to work on is probably still trying to split our country up more, just to try and get a better even graze, because they do still just pick out what we sort of call the ice cream or the chocolate plants, and they don't eat everything evenly, which is probably where our biggest production gains can come from, is to utilise everything that's there rather than just having them poking around picking out the best bits.
And our small holding paddocks, like the way they've come back is just phenomenal, and they were bone right down to the ground. Like, I call it scalped, but they have come back immensely, and we've got our most grazes out of one of those paddocks as well, which is pretty crazy. And yeah, if I always say just take heaps of photos, because I'm a photo person, but I still don't take enough photos. The way the country changes so quickly, just take as many as you can. More monitoring the points, the better. Yeah, you can never have enough, can you?
No, because I don't take any, and I always think I'll remember what that looked like, and 10 days later you got no idea what was there. So yeah, it is very important. This is the difference we found between the two halves of our property, between what's set stocked and what's been under rotation, is that the ewes, we've been part of another group doing, it's mainly condition scoring ewes. So yeah, ewes were in better condition score. We ended up with 22% better lambing percentage in the mob that had been rotated than the set stocked ones. The ewes and the lambs are in better nick, heavier, more wool off the ones in rotation. And yeah, the weaners, I think it's probably partly because they're so settled when you go to wean them, because they've been handled a fair few times in their lives. You don't seem to have that trouble you can have with weaners which we all know.
So one of our other biggest things has been the walk to water. We probably had, there's 2Ks, 3Ks and at the worst 4Ks in our country. And once we put them into big mobs, we could really see what they were doing, where they were going. And we've really come to work out that they're only walking a K to the north and 1.2 to the south. So we've realised that we're not utilising bugger all of our country. You think you know where they're going when you have small numbers and you think they go out further, but they're really not going that far. And once we...
They will move outside that area at times, but not for long. Like they go for a quick wander and then they're straight back to the water. And yeah, and with the large mobs, you can really pick where they've been by riding or driving around, you know, and it's amazing. You head off from water and you head out and you get to that kilometre and it just changes. Like they literally, it's like there's a boundary there and they just stop.
And when you rest that, it actually gets greener when you come back in, like it gets greener as you get closer to the water. Yeah, pretty crazy. So we've started to add more watering points just in sort of easy spots really. We've just put a tank and a trough in where a pipeline is and created I think we've opened up 2,500 hectares so far. And that's allowing us to rest more and more country as well by having those extra points. We use the RCS term of plan, monitor and manage to keep us on track with where we're going. We use grazing charts to help us out with moves. We use feed budgeting, which I find quite difficult still. And the RCS charts to know our DSE and carrying capacity, and RCS has a chart where you can put your benchmark in and your carrying capacity, and we now work in rolling rainfall instead of like a January to December rainfall. Like so far we've had 170 mils from January, whereas if you talk rolling rainfall, we've had 380
for the last 12 months.
For the last 12 months. So to change over that thinking, and that chart's something I really use a lot to know when because it goes off of your rainfall and your stocking rate. So you have an idea when you're getting close to the benchmark per 100 mil of rain. I can show you, it's a bit hard to explain, but it helps us out, and it also gives us a bit of a understanding of when other people are going to start panicking about what feed they've got, and gives us options with markets and predicting what's going to happen. So it's a really, really, really useful tool. So just further down the track, we're just going to work on more waters and fencing, develop the country more to have more control over the grazing and the rest, and that plant growth, and we really want to work with the season cycles. I know a lot of people talk about the soil, but I think the sun and that plant growth it's something really to learn about, and if you get a chance to, we really want to work with the sun and the whole cycle and how it all functions together. That's what we've got. Lots of trials and experimenting going on, and lots of learning really. A lot more education, and so thank you guys for coming out who've talked before us, because it's people like you coming out here that is teaching us a lot as well. So thank you. And thanks, Jess.